Welcome to the New Life Ministries podcast. This morning's message was delivered when the tensions from the States were first beginning in Canada. Our country was beginning to feel politically threatened. This was not unsimilar to the land of Judah when great prophecies about Jesus were given. Let's consider what those messages were about in light of how we feel in our world today.
Hey, today we're going to look at Isaiah 8 and 9. Page 1034, if you have a New Living Translation giant print Bible.
Last week the pages were wrong.
What? Yeah, last week the pages were wrong. So in the news this week, the president-elect of the U.S., Donald Trump, wrote the following on social media. He wrote, "No one can answer why we subsidize Canada to the tune of over $100 million a year. Makes no sense. Many Canadians want Canada to become the 51st state. They would save massively on taxes and military protection. I think it's a great idea, 51st state." I am not a political scientist, so understand fully what he was referring to. And from the responses that I read, a lot of people didn't understand what he was referring to. But when he said many Canadians want to be part of the states, I looked up the surveys on that, because there are surveys done every 10 years or so. And the number is always around about 13%, which means 87% of Canadians do not want to be part of the states. Now, I suspect part of what Trump is doing is a little tongue-in-cheek and trying to stir the pot a little bit. However, I was pondering, what if that comment was made by leaders of another country? Like, what if the leaders of China were to say, many people in Tibet want to be part of China? The world would go, pardon? Or if the leader of Germany in a previous era had said Austria and Holland would be a great addition to Germany. Well, we know how that turned out. Or if Britain were to say, why are we exporting products to France? We should just make them part of the United Kingdom. Statements like these would be considered hostile, and they would be suggestive of war. Because the question comes up, is that comment made because there is a plan to try and take over the other country? Is there a hidden agenda that is starting to come to light? Is there a desire to conquer? And so that is unsettling. Now, this talk's not going to be about Canada's political relationship with the States, but imagine how we would feel if there were more and more indicators that the U.S. government was indeed making plans to try to take over Canada. Well, they have a stronger, larger military force. This would be unsettling. We are spread out across a very large land, which makes it hard to defend. That is unsettling. The only thing we have to our advantage is something we call winter, and that should stop anybody from California. But that mindset of feeling threatened, with that mindset of feeling threatened by a foreign nation, I want to look at Isaiah 8 and 9. We often read Isaiah 9 this time of year. It's a passage that predicts the birth of Jesus, but by understanding its context and its environment, I'm hoping we see a little bit more in the passage. So here's the back. You guys are all with me? No one's upset that the States is going to try to take over Canada? That was a weird thing to put in print. It's not weird considering the source. So here's the backstory for Isaiah 8 and 9. The Assyrian army, which is above the land of Israel, is expanding its kingdom. And it has eyes set on everything down the Fertile Crescent, including Judah, all the way to Egypt. Like, they want to take over the whole thing. And there are two nations above the nation of Judah that are forming an alliance in order to fight Assyria. And they want the king of Judah to join them so that there'd be three nations together. And they're so adamant that they should do this that they've said, if you don't join us, we're going to attack you. And so the king of Judah is wondering if he should form an alliance with Assyria himself to protect himself from the two nations that are above him. And Isaiah the prophet is writing to the nation and to the king saying, don't do this, don't do any of this. The story behind the story is that God is disciplining the northern nation of Israel and disciplining the southern nation of Judah for their unfaithfulness to him. So what's the answer to the threat of war? Well, if you know that war is coming, if you feel like war is coming, people respond with rally the troops, train the army. Let's find a strong leader who will lead us so that we are not overpowered and conquered. Let's get somebody who's got a good backbone, who can stand up against other countries in international relationships. We need a strong king who is stronger than those other nations. And the question then comes up, will God save us by providing us with the leader that we need? And what God answers with, what he promises, is something completely unexpected from their questions. So let me offer a prayer and we'll read this together. Father, would you bless us by speaking to us through your word and helping us to see this Isaiah 9 and the passage about Jesus, to help us see it with fresh eyes and in a new way, and draw us to trust you, to lean into our trust of you as you guide history, as you guide our country, as you guide our individual lives. Because you are trustworthy and you are good and you love us deeply. So glorify yourself. Amen. So I'm going to start with Isaiah 8, again, page 1034. Isaiah is speaking, and he's telling folks what God has told him. And he's encouraging them to think differently than how everybody's normally thinking in the crisis situation. Okay, so I'm going to start with verse 11. The Lord has given me strong warning not to think like everyone else does. He says, don't call everything a conspiracy like they do, and don't live in dread of what frightens them. Make the Lord of heaven's armies, Lord Almighty, make the Lord of heaven's armies holy in your life. He is the one you should fear. He is the one who should make you tremble. He will keep you safe. But to Israel and Judah, he will be a stone that makes people stumble, a rock that makes them fall. For the people of Jerusalem, he will be a trap and a snare. Many will stumble and fall, never to rise again. They will be snared and captured. Preserve the teachings of God. Entrust his instructions to those who follow me. I will wait for the Lord, who has turned away from the descendants of Jacob. I will put my hope in him. I and the children the Lord has given me serve as signs and warnings to Israel from the Lord of heaven's armies who dwells in his temple on Mount Zion. Someone may say to you, let's ask the mediums and those who consult the spirits of the dead. With their whisperings and mutterings, they will tell us what to do. But shouldn't people ask God for guidance? Should the living seek guidance from the dead? Look to God's instructions and teachings. People who contradict his word are completely in the dark. They will go from one place to another, weary and hungry. And because they are hungry, they will rage and curse their king and their God. They will look up to heaven and down to earth, but wherever they look, there will be trouble and anguish and dark despair. They will be thrown out into the darkness. Nevertheless, that time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. The land of Zebulun and Naphtali will be humbled, but there will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in the land of deep darkness, a light will shine. You will enlarge the nation of Israel, and its people will rejoice. They will rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, and like warriors dividing the plunder. For you will break the yoke of their slavery and lift the heavy burden from their shoulders. You will break the oppressor's rod, just as you did when you destroyed the army of Midian. The boots of the warrior and the uniforms blood-stained by war will all be burned. They will be fuel for the fire. For a child is born to us, a child is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. The passionate commitment of the Lord of heaven's armies will make this happen. So in this setting of feeling threatened, chapter 8 starts with the chaos of people's opinions and behavior. Just imagine the crowd. What's going on here? Who's lying to us? Our leaders, the media, the leaders of other nations? What's going on? And you can imagine someone's like, look, my friend's boyfriend was talking to his boss's wife who heard that what's really happening is, and there's all this conspiracy, right? We're not being told the truth. And if we don't know the truth, we don't know how to react properly. And in Isaiah's context, folks were consulting spiritualists who claimed to know from dead folks what's really going on. And Isaiah's message is, stop this. Trust God. Consult with God. Seek God. Those who don't seek God and trust God are left completely in the dark. So one theme in the book of Isaiah is judgment and hope. And people often misunderstand how these two words work together. Some people say, I believe in God, and so therefore I will not undergo judgment. And I'm happy, I have hope that I will not be judged. Or, we are God's people, we will not be judged, and that gives me hope. So this kind of hope is about avoiding what will be uncomfortable in judgment. So this is a judgment that's about condemnation, and we want to avoid condemnation. And for disciples of Jesus, that judgment is removed. But there's another kind of judgment that's about cleaning. The point of this kind of judgment is to clean up what is wrong, and when the wrong is gone, the nation, the people, can return to being what they are supposed to be. There is hope here, but it's hope that comes by going through judgment. The hope of goodness being restored after things have been cleaned. So there is hope that is avoiding judgment and avoiding what is uncomfortable. That's not the message of Isaiah. Then there's another hope that is having God clean up the mess, and then goodness and purpose are restored. So it's not hope instead of judgment. It's hope that comes by going through judgment. Sometimes we miss what God wants to do in us through difficult experiences because we think he should be rescuing us out of the crisis. So we try to get through the crisis quickly, or we look for ways to avoid the crisis. Instead, we perhaps want to ask, what is God wanting to change in me through this crisis? What does he want to clean up in me? How can I engage with that lesson and let that change happen? So that's what the threat from these nations was all about. Rather than people thinking, how can I find the best political alliance to get through this crisis quickly, or how can I find out what secret conspiracy is going on to avoid the crisis, God is wanting them to come back to trusting him wholeheartedly so he can clean them, so he can get them to obey and do what they are supposed to be doing, which is representing him truthfully on earth. So God was trying to change them through the crisis, and they're looking for ways to get out of the crisis. So for us, as we navigate a crisis that comes into our life, there is a way of staying focused on God as we engage with the problem. We look at God, we look at God squarely and dependently, and we keep him in front of us as we consider the steps and what advice and what to do. And there's another path that when the crisis comes into our life, we put God into a box and put him out of mind, and we try to solve the problem. If God is bringing you into a crisis to clean something out of you, then keeping focused on him is going to produce the better result. So let me give you not a great example, but this was the example that was in my head this morning, or yesterday. So let's say you're hungry and you don't have a job, you don't have a stable set income. Hunger is the crisis. One prayer is, Lord, please give me money, and I trust you will send it my way. And that is expecting God to rescue you from the crisis of hunger. Another prayer is, Lord, I think you want me to get a job. Are you bringing in this crisis so that I change? If so, will you help me to find the job, or will you help me to hold the job? And that's going through the crisis so that it changes you. And I get that this is a very trite example. I'm trying to illustrate a point. Sometimes the crisis isn't just happening to us. The crisis is God himself bringing it into our life to change something about how we live. So asking God to please rescue me from the crisis that he has brought into my life is a bit of an upside down prayer. With me? So back to our text. Chapter 8 says, those who ignore God are left in darkness. And then chapter 9 moves into hope. The hope that this period of crisis is going to end. God will restore. So it says in chapter 9, verse 1, nevertheless, that time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. There will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles will be filled with glory. Verse 2, the people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in the land of deep darkness, a light will shine. The crisis will end. The judgment that is about cleaning will be over. There is hope. And then verse 4, for you, God, will break the yoke of their slavery and lift the heavy burden from their shoulder. You will break the oppressor's rod, just as when you destroyed the army of Midian. Have hope. The crisis that these enemy nations are bringing into your life, that threat will be over. So do you know the story of Midian's defeat? That's the story of Gideon, back in the book of Judges. Gideon is called by God to fight against an army that is described as being so big and so thick, they look like locusts. And they have more camels fighting with them than there is sand on the shore. And God takes Gideon with his army, and they look at this massive army they have to battle, and God says, you've got too many people, Gideon. Let's bring you down to 300 soldiers. And those 300 soldiers defeat the battle. And it's a great story because they don't even go to war. In the middle of the night, they light torches and put them in clay jars, and they stand around the camp of the enemy army, and at a certain point, they smash the jars. And what the enemy army hears is all this shattering and then fire all around, and they go so nutty they fight and kill each other. And so God wins the battle. Gideon doesn't even have to fight. And by quoting it, it's saying, God can display his power and ability and defeat the armies that are trying to overpower your country. He's done it before. He can do it again. Don't worry. God is trustworthy. And the natural response of people when they heard that line, I think would be, phew, we can trust. I wonder what this new leader will be like. Will he be like Gideon? Or maybe he'll be like Samson, really strong. Or maybe he'll be like King David because he knew how to fight. They were all great fighters. Whatever it is, this new leader is going to be stronger and more strategic than the king of Assyria. This is going to be awesome. And so then Isaiah describes this new leader. A child is born to us. A son is given. And the government will be on his shoulder. And someone in the crowd goes, wait. A child? A newborn? The one we are going to set, the one who's going to lead us against the most powerful nation that surrounds us is a child? And because we know how this passage gets fulfilled in Jesus, I think we miss the outrageousness of it. Because people would hear it and say, wait, a child needs to grow up, become a man, become mature, learn to battle, learn to lead. This is going to take a whole lot of time. And we're going to be in this crisis for a long time. And so the people of Judah need to trust this God who's telling them solution's coming, but it's going to be a while. They have to deeply trust God to help them through this crisis. This is not sit back and relax. Whew, God's got this. He's going to rescue us out of the problem by Tuesday. This is instead, I have to sit up and make a choice. Do I trust what God is saying and go through this crisis that sounds like it's going to take many years and let that change me? Or do I put God in a box, put the box on a shelf, and find some other way out of this problem? So then Isaiah offers us more hope. Let me describe this child to you. Verse 6, he will be called Wonderful Counselor, which means he knows what to do. He has insight. One translator said, you could translate it, extraordinary strategist. Like, okay, that sounds pretty good. Mighty God, that's a very confusing term because no king, no person in Israel is called God. So one writer said maybe Isaiah is trying to push their thinking that the one they're looking for to lead them is actually God himself. But the word mighty means warrior. The word is gabor. It means warrior. So whoever this new child is going to be a fighter. He's going to know how to fight. Everlasting Father. He will be the protector of his people, and he will have a long reign, a long dynasty. And he will be the Prince of Peace. His government and peace will never end, which means his kingdom will continue to expand, but not through physical violence and warfare. His kingdom will expand through peace. And he will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. The picture that Isaiah is describing is God himself. That God will be their warrior king. God will be their protector. And God's kingdom will come and grow through peace. Now, how that worked as a physical leader made no sense to them at this point in history. Like, I don't think they had a clue how this was going to work. And again, I think Isaiah's point is to encourage people, you need to return to being faithful and trusting God. He is the solution to the crisis. So when we encounter a crisis, or a friend encounters a crisis, or a family member, it's really easy to ask God to remove the crisis. Like, that's how we tend to pray. Please spare them this pain. Please remove this crisis for them. Please solve the problem quickly. Maybe the better prayer, the better perspective is for the person to lean into God and to attach to God more through the crisis. That we would pray for them to become so dependent on God, they are obedient to God. That kind of dependency allows Jesus to clean whatever he wants to clean. And then there's the hope of restoration after the cleaning. So in the crisis, what is God calling them to engage with, to perhaps work on? And that's part of praying with them. That's part of asking some good questions and discerning. But maybe the crisis is for them to learn to get their sexuality under control. Or maybe the crisis is about learning to live within their means, or not coveting, which are connected. Maybe the crisis is to learn to ask for help and to put their requests out there rather than stealing or trying to get what they need through some nefarious purpose. Maybe the crisis is about learning to tell the truth and speak truthfully. We have to trust that sometimes the crisis comes into our life by God's hand, because in that judgment, he wants to clean something. So we need to lean into trusting God in the crisis. And that's what Isaiah 9 is kind of pointing at us. So let me summarize where we've been, and we'll talk about this passage. For the folks in Judah, God brings the crisis of enemy nations who are about to attack to get them to become attentive to him again. The crisis creates a certain chaos. Which enemy do we align with? Is there a conspiracy? What's going on? Let's consult with the dead to make our decisions. Judgment and hope. Some people want God not to judge them, and that gives them hope, rescued from hardship and crisis. That's not the message of Isaiah. This is judgment that is about cleaning, exposing what is out of step with God so that by cleaning, people and the nation can be restored to what they were supposed to be. Hope that comes through judgment. We can miss what God wants to do in crisis because we think he should be rescuing us from that crisis. We need to lean into the dependency and ask if there's anything God wants to change. And so Isaiah was given this picture of hope. God will restore. Darkness will end. And it will come through a child, a newborn, which made no sense to them whatsoever. But this new person has the traits of God himself: wisdom, power, protection, and peace. And the people had to make a choice to lean into trusting God as they went through the crisis. So, what catches your attention in this text? What challenges you in the text? Or by understanding the greater context, reshapes how you see this passage? What challenges you? What catches your attention?
I love this idea in there. It says that he will be a mighty strategist and a mighty warrior. And Jesus was that. He was the strategist. He was the warrior who knew when to lay low and when to attack. And through strategy and resolute strength, he ripped death right out from under Satan when Satan thought, I've got him now. I've done it. I've killed God. I win. And Jesus goes, oh, you fell for that. Okay, cool. We already knew you would. So the other thing was that the whole idea of the world gives you don't worry, be happy, kind of sarcastic, I'll just close my eyes and it'll all be fine. God gives us lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will set your path straight. When we, instead of burying our heads in the sand, when we look at life and we acknowledge this is confusing, this is so much more than I can do. Okay, God, it's yours. Do with me what is best. And he makes it work. Because don't worry, be happy just doesn't work. Yeah, that was what was running through my head.
I want to be there when Jesus says to Satan, oh, you fell for that. I knew you would.
Isn't there a very interesting connection here to Christ's birth, which I find kind of interesting, because we were talking about this yesterday. It comes up here, and I didn't know it was here. He says, he will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. But watch the next part. The passionate commitment of the Lord of heaven's armies. When Christ was born, the shepherds were on the fields, and there it talks about then the host of heaven's armies, the angels, came down. In other words, there were thousands probably of angels that the shepherds saw. And they're called heaven's armies. In Luke, I think it is. Yeah.
Yep.
So there's this connection there as well. The passionate commitment of the Lord of heaven's armies. Thousands of angels were supporting Christ.
Yeah, it's great. Assyria doesn't look so threatening then.
I'm just going to go back to the last little verse that I had read from the writer this morning, where it talked about, let me learn by paradox the way down is the way up, and that to be low is to be high. And he went on kind of flipping things around. And so this little baby being the solution for such a great threat, for such great oppression later on in the Roman world, and even for us now, is maybe a hard thing for people in the midst of terror or real anxiety to trust in. One of the things that I was very encouraged about in this person's writing, but also in what Larry had reflected on this week, was the idea of simple acts of faith.
Yeah.
Like, you don't actually have to be a great leader to respond in faith, to do the thing you've been given to do, and in that way participate with God in his kingdom come, his will being done. And so don't ever despise the littleness of who you might think you are. Responding in faith nonetheless gives us opportunity to be part of this story.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. Simple moments of faith. We were talking earlier in the week, little moments where you get to speak into someone's life or they become vulnerable for just a moment or two. And those little moments of, I think God would have me say this. I think God would have me offer this little piece. That's how the kingdom moves forward in tremendous ways.
Two thoughts this morning. One, our small group is studying the book Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Pete Scazzaro. And there's a statement in there we were looking at this past week that says, I'll sum it up, 'cause I don't remember the exact quote, but essentially how we deal with and how we handle our emotions is a discipleship issue. Christine says, no one ever told me that growing up. And that's what we're seeing here, how they handle their emotions, fear, dread, uncertainty, is a discipleship issue. And so I find that a good reminder. My second thought is, I forget where I read this, but it's not mine originally. In order for me to figure out what I need to do, I need to consider what is the bigger story that I'm a part of. And so when I consider the bigger story, then that helps me determine direction. And if I can remember that in times of peace and in times of crisis, then hopefully that will help direct my next steps. So what is the bigger story that I've been called into, that I am a part of? So just those reminders came to my mind.
Oh, that's great. I love it. It also just gives more space for making mistakes. I think, when we do something that isn't square on what God would have, but we're trying to be attentive to what our calling is, I think God sees the intent behind it. Of course, he sees the intent behind it. And it's like, yep, hey, that was a great partial step. Not quite exactly what I need, but I can work with this. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, beautiful.
This morning, weirdly, made me think of hoarders' hoards.
Oh, do tell.
And so I have some experience with hoarders in my family and some weird tendencies that I've had to deal with myself. And there's this moment, or many moments, in lots of hoarders' lives where you come up to the point of, my house is being condemned, I'm being evicted, all of these terrible things are happening. And you see your family going through this, where they're like, I just need someone to step in. I can't live here anymore, so they need to give me a new place to live. And that's never the step, because it just starts over.
Yep.
And this mental image of, I know exactly who you need to talk to. And they send over like a 13-year-old girl or something. And it's like, what? That moment of, I need this thing. And it's like, no, what you need is this entirely other direction. And it's not going to make sense right now. And that's okay. But this isn't going to serve you. But if you can work with this other person and you change these things, you work on the fundamentals, you'll get to that place you want her to be here. And I find that fascinating, that it was you don't need us to give you a new thing. You don't need us to take away the bad thing, because the bad thing is the motivation to get there. You need someone to steer you in the right direction. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, lovely. Love how you said that. Let me offer a prayer. Father, what an interesting passage. And I know I've appreciated this week pondering that Isaiah 9 comes after Isaiah 8, and that this is one teaching, one lesson. Father, thank you that you are not content with rubbish in our life that hurts us, and that when you judge us, you do it with gentleness and compassion and deep understanding and the desire to clean, so that we are free and restored and able to be in a better way what you have called us to be. So as scary as crisis can be, let me praise you when it happens, when it comes from you. And Lord, help us to not only trust you, but that Lord, help us to be a community where we encourage each other to be faithful and lean in and lean into that dependency where you can clean and purify. Help us to encourage each other that way here. We praise you and we love you. And Jesus, it is so cool to know that this is part of what you are about. Yeah. Amen.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. New Life Ministries is located in Winnipeg, Manitoba. You are invited to join our service in person or over Zoom. Please use the Contact Us link to send an email to the church office and request the address or Zoom link. If you would like to use these podcasts as part of your home church or local church gathering, you are free to do so. We do request that you let us know. If there is any other way that we can help you in your ministry, please send us an email.